Loving what you're hearing? Well, the establishment hates it. And right now, they're conjuring up new ways to try and censor RCR. To ensure you never miss a beat of the hard-hitting news you've come to know and love, make sure you're on the RCR mailing list. Get connected now at realitycheck.radio/email.
Winston Peters was on the Crunch in March, so it's time for a catch-up, and I've got a bone to pick with him. Now, I managed to catch him on Monday morning before he flew out on another diplomatic mission to the Pacific. So let's listen to Winston now. Welcome back to the Crunch, Winston Peters. Good to have you back.
No problem. Thank you for having me on.
Now, I hear you heading off overseas again tonight. You're spending a lot of time overseas, Winston. I guess that's the job of Foreign Minister.
Well, it's not just the job of the Foreign Minister. The reality is when you have vacuums and voids through lack of attention, a new government's got to make it up as fast as possible. We've covered more ground than the last government did on this matter in the whole 3 years. That more, and just on 6 months. So it's not sort of a travel contest. Look, it's hard work. You're flying all the way tonight to Solomon Islands and straight into tomorrow morning, then on to Nauru and then on to Niue. But we've got to ensure that we, in the Blue Pacific, of which we're a critical member alongside other countries, we're all critical, have a proper engagement, because in the end, as time goes by, people want to be influenced. They want to know what your influence is and how can they influence you. And it comes down to personal contacts. You can do all the, you can do all the meetings you like, but it's nothing like face-to-face.
You recently went to Fiji. I'm particularly interested in Fiji. What was your impression of the state of Fiji just a bit over a year past the last election they had there?
Look, I went there. The first country I went to after the new government was formed was Fiji, because they're a critical part of the Pacific, particularly in that part of the world, so to speak, alongside the Pacific Islands Forum being there as well. So I had meetings with Rambuka, and he took me along to the army barracks, which he hadn't been to all those years since he was once the former Prime Minister under different circumstances. But we went along for the first time in his recent career to the army barracks, and I got to see half of the cabinet there, so it was very, very good.
Now, I've got a bit of a bone to pick with you. People say to me often, don't vote for Winston Peters, he never delivers. Name me one thing that Winston Peters delivers. Well, that's always easy, that one, because I just say the gold card.
What about the Prevention Growth Fund? What about all the new aeroplanes that the military have got?
Under
us.
No, I know that, but I'm stunned, because in the last week or so, we've had nothing but delivery from New Zealand First on promises.
Well, the Therapeutics Products Bill, the first reading's come up. It's the repeal bill, mind you. And we've also secured a full comprehensive inquiry into the COVID disaster, particularly the 2021-2022 period, when gross amounts of civil liberties and rights were attacked, and we spent billions, tens of billions of dollars needlessly.
You invoked the coalition agree to disagree clause. Now, there seems to be some confusion amongst listeners about that. They're saying that you're sort of caving in. But, yeah, correct me if I'm wrong here, but isn't the agree to disagree bit about the continuation of the existing Commission of Inquiry, and that's what you disagreed with the government on, or the National Party and ACT Party on?
Well, National and ACT wanted to continue the old, imperfect, and I say utterly compromised Commission of Inquiry. And they had reasons to call it quits, because the moment Hekia Parada resigned, that was legal grounds to shut the thing down.
Yeah.
But, if you can't get people to agree, then the next best thing is to say, well, let's disagree and let's have the option that we campaigned on, and which is in the coalition agreement. And that's what we're going to get come October this year.
Well, that's the start of it, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you believe that Tony Blakely is compromised as the chair of that?
Well, in his declarations of conflict of interest, he said so himself. And he was advising all sorts of bodies, and he was also advising one Andrews in Victoria. They had the longest lockdown of us all, and we had the second longest lockdown. You see what I mean? And I'm not attacking anybody personally. All I'm saying is in a professional, ethical, constitutional way, this is not the right group of people for this job.
Yeah. The feeling amongst many people is the original inquiry was set up as a whitewash to justify everything that was done.
The terms of reference tells you that.
Yeah.
The moment I saw those terms of reference, I said so. This is designed to cover the government's backside.
Well, not just the government, too. Every party that was in Parliament at the time. New Zealand First wasn't there at the time when those decisions were made.
Well, every party at the time signed up. You wouldn't believe this. They signed a pact with Labour not to talk to these protesters. These protesters were, in some cases, 35 years in highly successful businesses, losing the whole lot, or being mandated out of their job because they didn't want to be vaccinated. People have got a right to say no.
It was an appalling display, which, of course, ended up with you being trespassed from Parliament by the then Speaker, Trevor Mallard, who now works for you.
Well, I was trespassed alongside some of my other former MP colleagues off the parliamentary grounds on the basis that I was a terrorist. Now, that's a shocking disgrace. Did you see any mainstream journalists say this is appalling?
No, I didn't. I saw them all sort of laughing, going, ha ha, all these politicians have been trespassed.
They all thought it was a big joke until I took Mallard to the High Court and had him done over. But you see what I mean? This is how I begin now to see how some societies are so corroded because no one stands up for fundamental rights, and sooner or later there are no rights. And I saw during this period hints of how societies go wrong when everyone decided that if you had a different view on vaccinations, then you were down a rabbit hole, or you're a conspiracy theorist, or you were off the planet, mentally speaking. Yep. All those things they did to people. And now they don't want to have the other side of the debate being put up by forensic experts saying, hang on, there were defects in all of this, and you needed to know them.
Isn't part of the problem the fact that a vibrant democracy relies on a very strong and vocal fourth estate that holds powerful to account, and it actually don't become cheerleaders for those who are in power?
Well, you say powerful fourth estate, they'll only be that if they are independent, and if they're prepared to tell both sides of the story, both sides of the argument, in any production that they are involved in. They don't just stop with, these are what we think as journalists. They go and find where there's an alternative view and put that view out there and let the reader desire what they want. The reader, after all, in case they don't know it, or the listener, in case they don't know it, or the viewer, in case they don't know it, is actually the master in all this, because in the end, if you don't have them, you don't have a business.
There's a lot of talk about propping the media up with state funding. We saw the results of that during the Ardern regime when they had the Public Interest Journalism Fund, and it was neither in the public's interest nor was it journalism.
Downright corrupt. You had to sign up to their narrative.
Yeah.
And, when I said it was corrupt, these journalists and producers and ownership, they were incensed with me saying that. And I feel like saying, listen, you so-and-so, I know what corruption looks like. I've seen it and I've exposed a lot of it in my career. And you sign up to a narrative where if you don't stick to the narrative, they can take the money back off you. Don't tell me that you are innocent.
Well, they're not innocent. They're actually collaborators. They were the collaborators with the previous government. And they worked hard to silence dissent. It was all part of I don't know whether it was overt or covert or arranged or nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But I found it very strange that almost every media outlet was in lockstep exactly with what the government was saying.
Look, it's July 2022 when the Serious Fraud Office, having lost the case at the High Court, goes off to seek an appeal, and they get beaten a second time. I put out a press statement about that, and not one mainstream media carried one word I said That is the view of the victor in a court case. Then they appealed another time, and they lost, therefore, 3 in a row. Now, let me tell you this. How can they spend $4.2 million and get away with it and have the journalists in this country not prepared to print one word of New Zealand First winning this victory against a serious sport office? And we won because, as the court said and agreed with our plea, so what is the crime here? And they could not outline what the crime was. So see what happens. Electoral Commission, Serious Sport Office, they're all out there going for one political party and its leader. And here's the rub. They never even interviewed me. But how like that for dirt and underhand behaviour?
Well, but they say that they're all pure. I mean, but there's 2 examples just in the last week, isn't there, of mainstream media failing to report major news. The first was, of course, a poll by Curia Market Research about Maori wards. Not a mutter, not a murmur, nothing from TVNZ.
That was stunning. That was massive. A clear indicator, and a polling company that they use. But for this case, they decide to shut it down.
Yeah,
didn't use it.
The numbers were spectacular. Like 58% of people believe it should be the ratepayers who decide on Maori wards, not councils.
But the majority
67% of Maori Party supporters and 51% of Labour Party supporters say the same thing.
Well, that was a stunning part about it. The Maori people were for fairness as well. But here, have you got these people saying, no, we're the voice of Maoridom, not you. Yeah. We'll speak for you. This is arrogant. This is what I call inverse racism. And a lot of Maori have got inverse racism. They got racism against their own people when it comes to their own people, especially in their view.
And then they did nothing about the COVID inquiry either. It wasn't mentioned at all that it had been. The only thing they mentioned is that you'd invoke the agree to disagree, but not the extension of your promises being met by the government with the new inquiry.
Sorry for them? Don't you feel sorry for some of these media people? I do.
No, not one bit.
No, I do. I feel if that's the quality and sincerity, integrity, or the romance and glamour you place around your profession and how important it is, then I feel sorry for you because you don't understand how critical free press is. You know that famous French Arcuse? He wrote a book. He wrote this attack on the French government way back almost over a century ago, and it changed French politics. He just went out and said, this has got to be said. But no, here we got the New Zealand media, unlike any around the Western world, I got to say, they're utterly self-censoring, in tune with each other against what I think is the majority public need to know. And it shows now big time.
Now, speaking of media fusses and non-news, have you received the papers from Chumbawamba yet?
You know I never will. Look how many headlines they gave it. Oh, they were horrified.
Winston Peters to be sued. You don't have to file papers in a court in order to be sued?
Well, if you leave too much time between the event, it shows that the event has not had any damage or the complaint that you have has no merit. It begins to show that.
They probably had increased sales as a result of it.
Look, I think everybody had forgotten them until I revived it.
Well, I see Joe Biden used it on the weekend to self-promote on his Twitter account. He was saying, if you get knocked down, you got to get up again, and there's even a song for that. So I'm wondering when some of the media lovies in New Zealand are going to contact Chumbawamba and ask if Joe Biden's going to get sued.
Well, you'll be astonished how around the world politicians watch other campaigns and actually sometimes steal some of the ideas. Do you remember Obama saying, can we fix it? Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Well, who had that campaign? We grabbed Bob the Builder in 2002 and ran that as our theme in a snap election, which Helen Clark had called. It went from 1.8 to 10.8 in 4 weeks. But that was the theme. Then not too long after that, I hear a guy called Obama saying, can we fix it? Yes, we can. It's amazing, I'm not saying we don't, but I watch overseas campaigns to see the cleverness or the wisdom and trying to avoid the mistakes that you see overseas campaigns making.
I remember one of the biggest mistakes I ever saw was Ed Miliband standing there with this big, massive stone that he'd got a stonemason to carve his promises into. Of course, he didn't win the election, so I wonder what happened to that stone. It was massive.
Well, I remember the Longy government talking about their promises written in stone, and it turns out it was written on plastic because at the end of the day, Moses, having come down from the mountain, showed that it wasn't capable of delivering.
Well, Helen Clark had her pledge cards, remember, paid for by the taxpayer, of course, and passed retrospective legislation to make that legal. It's just unbelievable.
That's a fascinating case, though, because when we all got caught by that retrospective legislation, and New Zealand's number one tax lawyer said to Winston, you have to confirm that money to give it to some charities. You cannot give it back to the government because it'll attract charity tax. Charitable taxation has a certain ceiling. This is the number one tax lawyer telling me that. So we gave it to 10 charities, including a woman who was massively damaged at the family RSA and almost lost her life. We helped her get her home and get started, get back in life. But you know something, the rest paid it back. And this is in our case, when I look back on it, the Electoral Office gave us permission or okayed a lot of our expenditure before we expended. But when they got the law wrong, we got blamed.
Yeah.
There's no justice in this world, right?
Well, it's like the Serious Fraud Office prosecutions against New Zealand First. Well, indeed, the National Party and the Labour Party as well, where the Serious Fraud Office tried to shoehorn Electoral Act or alleged Electoral Act offences into the Crimes Act, turned the law inside out and upside down, and unsurprisingly lost at every step of the way.
Yeah, but here's the rub. When they went for the Labour Party on that art auction, even the court judge said, so to the Serious Fraud Office, so where's your evaluation of the artwork? So they're running a case, but they don't have an evaluation for the artwork because they intend to lose the case. If they'd done evaluation of the artwork, there'd have been a different outcome. But how can you be a Serious Fraud Officer and go in a case like that when staring out that this artwork that's probably only worth about 5 cents is going for $40,000? They had to do an evaluation, and they didn't do it. Now, please don't tell me this is a first world type of serious fraud operation.
Well, it's not that serious, is it? You know, when there's glaring errors like that. But again, what we're seeing is a propensity of government organisations to turn laws inside out and upside down. They did that during COVID with the lockdowns. The Health Act says that the Director General of Health can isolate someone who is sick.
Yes.
And they extended that to let's isolate everybody, lock you all up in your apartments and your houses, and you can't go anywhere because you might get sick.
Ah, yes. It was quite incredible. I mean, when we didn't know, I can understand that period. It's the famous president of the United States. His name was Roosevelt, and he's starting after the Great Depression with a New Deal, and he said something that we should always remember in politics. He said, we may not always get it right, but we'll keep on trying. Well, that's not what happened in New Zealand. They said from day one, we know, you don't, we'll get it right.
You had the podium of truth.
And the rest is history.
I can remember, I snipped it at the time. I've still got the video. Jacinda Ardern saying, there's a lot of rumours out there that we're going to have lockdowns. They're not true. Unless you hear it from us, unless you hear it from our voices, it's not true. It's misinformation. This was, she was in Hamilton at the time campaigning, and 2 days later she was sitting there with the photo of Michael Joseph Savage over her shoulder, treating us all like preschoolers and saying we're all in lockdown. Well, she knew 2 days before that.
Yeah.
So you know, I remember her in 2017 saying, you know, she'd never told a lie in her political career. Well, that was the first one right there.
Well, it's, how shall I put it? Would she have deliberately lied? The answer to that probably is no, but she should never put herself in a situation where she had to gainsay or retract on her own words because she didn't have the experience to understand what was going to happen next. That's the reality of it all. Politics is it's all about being like a navigator on a rally drive, like a car or car race. It's not the next corner you worry about. It's the corner and the corner and the corner and the corner after that. And you've got to see around that corner. And I see so many in politics who don't realise they keep on talking about unforeseen consequences. No, they're totally foreseeable because somebody will have made that mistake before.
Well, it's like the healthy homes issue, isn't it? You know, Grant Robertson came out and said, "Oh, look, we don't think that the landlords will pass on the costs of upgrading their properties to healthy homes." I don't know what planet he lives on, but it doesn't have blue sky.
Well, you're quite right, actually. How shall I say? I would look back in the 1940, 45 Labor government, and those people were practical because they were some group of people who had done a lot of practical work. When they're talking about housing, they knew what they're talking about. Same with the National Party in the 50s. Those people knew what they were talking about. Then along come a whole lot of educated theorists, so to speak, who couldn't run the school tuck shop, and now they're running the country.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest vandals of New Zealand society was Simon Upton.
I can remember.
He probably doesn't like that, but he's the architect of the Resource Management Act, and there's been more damage done to New Zealand society by the Resource Management Act than anything else.
Well, no, to be honest with you, he inherited most of that draft was in the previous government. He inherited. His job was to fix it. But no, they just grabbed hold of it and went ahead of it. And as you know, it was enormously costly to New Zealand, all over New Zealand, because there were no what you might call nationwide standards. Half the time it depended where you were. You could get this in the Northern Regional Council, you couldn't get it in the Southern Regional Council. You get it somewhere else, you get all these permissive decisions were an enormous handicap. And the longest one was 28 years for a supermarket on the North Shore. 28 years waiting.
That's ridiculous. It reminds me of the building of the Maori Bridge. You know, for years it was just held up by a few stroppy unions. You know, just incredible progress has been halted by rascals. Really. Yeah,
it's a sad part of New Zealand's development, the irresponsibility of certain employers, but also the terrible irresponsibility of certain working unions and how they behaved as though their job was to obstruct everything rather than try and build something. And I say that as a former delegate for the Labourers Union when I was much younger.
Much younger and not as wise.
That's the most lowly union in the country.
Speaking of just touching back on foreign policy, have you heard from Beijing Bob Carr yet?
No.
So that's 2 out of 2.
Well, see, I said to the media, you made a hell of a lot of noise and you had all these headlines when you thought I was going to get done, but you can't even read the document. He didn't say he's going to sue me. He was saying, I'm going to talk to my lawyers and see what they think they should do.
Obviously, they've told him to don't even think about it.
Well, I was getting all these Aussie lawyers ringing up and saying, Winston, I want to act for you.
Yeah. You were probably relishing the discovery process of his bank accounts.
That's my point. I know what discovery is like, and it's devastating. And no, you don't. You've got the impression that you're going to sue, but you're not even telling me that. I didn't bother to reply to them, you know. And here we are. It's now, I think, 72 days.
Well, you know, you're keeping count.
Roughly, I know, but the time was much as by. Now, look, I've got a pre-cabinet meeting because I've got a cabinet at 11.
Yep. That's all right. I just got another couple of questions for you, to round out. You're a busy man. This is local. What do you think is going on with inside the Green Party?
Well, actually, they're an unholy mess, but they survive because they're not exposed by the media who don't do their job. Where's Darlene Tana? How can she be away all these months on the taxpayer? And how can she have cost $42,000 of the taxpayers' money in the case that they were using against her, the Greens? This is rotten. This stinks. You know, and we haven't those internal matters. We pay for it ourselves. But no, this is extraordinary. And one case after case after case after case, and there they are standing up and they're not affected by the polls because they're not being properly scrutinised, as some of us are, overly scrutinised.
Yeah, if you look at the treatment of Jamie Lee Ross by Tova O'Brien in an interview on television, just appalling behaviour.
Yeah.
Compare that with John Campbell's soft rub of a flannel with Golriz Garriman. Now, Jamie Lee Ross is never convicted of anything. She has been convicted and sentenced.
In Golriz's case, though, like I looked at this case from across the divide. I looked at the body language and I thought, you belong to a political party that spends all its time saying you love people, you care, and you have a heart. And you've demonstrated to me in that case that you know nothing about how to handle people. If I was an employer with someone like that, you'd have isolated very quickly and tried to sort it out because she did have a problem. That's clear as daylight. But this party that keeps on saying that they're the only ones you can trust demonstrated how vacuous they are about real people's issue when it comes to Golriz. So I've never said a word about Golriz, I think, but basically she's a victim of a party that promises everything but cannot treat people properly.
I did think, though, that her excuse saying I wanted out of politics was rather trite. You know, she had an opportunity at the last election to get out of politics by not standing. And you can always write a letter of resignation. But she said she went shoplifting so she would get out of politics. I thought that was very strange.
Well, and you could say all those things, but what I'm saying was, looking at her mental condition, I can understand why she's still making statements that don't make sense to anybody. But, you know, I just looked at, as a more experienced person, and watched it and I thought, hang on, I've had people who have had problems, and some of them have been medical problems, but I've said to them, they wanted to resign. And I said to them, no, you've got a bad back. You've got to go and have an operation. So you're off for 4 months. It won't matter. Get your back fixed up. A lot of chances like that. And people management is critical. In the Francis report about parliamentary behaviour and political parties, only one party survived. And because of that, Mallard didn't go public with it. The only party survived the Francis report was a party called New Zealand First.
And speaking of parties that may not survive, Te Pati Maori and the shenanigans going on with Manurewa Marae and Waipareira Trust and all of the murk that's around that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's massive illegalities, clear as daylight, from the census to the use of the census information, the illegality there, and then the preferential use of that information for political purposes, illegality there. And then you've got the fact that a well-known name and biggest names in New Zealand, Maori politics, NRA, lost by 42 votes. It tells me he was robbed of his seat illegally. Then you got 350,000 of taxpayers' charity money given to a political party, which is illegal. Now, what are the authorities doing about any of that right here, right now?
Well, they're just talking about having meetings, I think, at the moment, aren't they?
But it's disgusting. It's disgusting how inert they have been when they've been so ready to criticise other parties without one shred of evidence. But
they go and prosecute New Zealand First and a few other people at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, they prosecuted New Zealand First and didn't even go and question the leader. The full-on attack on one guy, I know that, me.
Yeah.
Didn't have the guts to even interview me. Why?
Is the core problem what we started talking about, the Fourth Estate and the lack of their rigour in certain areas?
Well, the Fourth Estate didn't even cover our trial because it started to look like they were going to lose.
Well, it was obvious from the beginning they were going to lose.
Yeah. You don't have to like someone. The job is to cover it off. I'm just seeing an election in France. Now, the far right have done extraordinarily well, but they weren't shut out because of media lack of coverage any more than the hard left were. Now, Trump came in third, but the hard right and the hard left still got their coverage in the French media. New Zealand is different.
No, they like using labels, and then they use those labels to silence you. I mean, they call you a populist like it's a bad thing.
I used to say to them when I was much younger, give me a break. Do you know anybody that sets out, and any person that I know that wants to be unpopular?
Well, especially politicians, they always want to be popular.
Yeah, but if you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're a news broadcaster, you want to be popular. But no, it's a slight, you see, because it suggests somehow you can't be trusted because you understand people, you read the room better than most. So therefore you can't be trusted because you don't exhibit the same ignorance as I do. That's somebody who can't. I got to go.
I know. On that note, Winston, thank you very much for coming on The Crunch. It's a pleasure to have you again.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodness, Winston was in fine form there. But let's be frank, he is delivering, particularly for the freedom movement. I was pleasantly surprised to hear some compassion from him too regarding Golriz Garriman. What do you think? Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
Thank you for tuning in to RCR, Reality Check Radio. If you like what you're listening to or dislike what you're listening to, either way, we want to hear from you. Get in touch with us now. You can text us with your message to 2057, that's 2057, or email us at inbox@realitycheck.radio. We would love to hear from you, so connect with us today.